Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study. In this series of Bible studies, we'll be taking a closer look at the Bible's evidence for the completion of the prolonged Judgment Day and the end of the world occurring in the year 2033. And now here's your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann.
Hello and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study. Our study is looking at the biblical evidence for the end of the world in the year 2033, and this is study number 21. We took a look at a verse in Deuteronomy. I'll read it again. It's in Deuteronomy 32, verse 8. That says, when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. And I pointed out how the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and keep in mind, the tribes have the names of the sons of Jacob, and they are the descendants of those original 12 sons of Jacob, and Jacob had his name changed to Israel. So the sons or the children of Israel have everything to do with the 12 tribes. But if you remember, I pointed out that there were actually 13 tribes because Joseph, who was the 11th son born, by the way, and we spoke last time of the number 11 pointing to the first coming of Christ, and Joseph, who was a great type of the Lord Jesus Christ, died at the age of 110, which is 10 times 11, and he was the 11th son born, and Joseph was blessed of God. And he was the one who was sold by his brothers as a slave into Egypt, and he went to prison, and he rose up out of prison to become the second in power beneath Pharaoh in all the land of Egypt. And finally, he revealed himself to his brethren, and they brought his father to Egypt, and Joseph took care of Jacob and all Israel and nourished them. And upon Jacob, who's also called Israel's death, or when he's on his deathbed, Joseph brought his two sons, Ephraim, Manasseh, to his father to receive a blessing. And God, through Jacob, blessed Joseph with a double portion. Both his sons became tribes of Israel. And it's just easy math, isn't it? If with Joseph you have 12 sons and Joseph himself becomes 2 tribes, how many tribes do you have? 13 tribes of Israel. And as is typical with the Bible, these things are not always on the surface or very apparent. But as you study the Bible, you see these things. And God here is saying that he, who is the Most High, divided to the nations their inheritance. And their inheritance, this is referring to fallen mankind, to the sons of Adam. Their inheritance is a temporal inheritance. They are not the elect children of God, the ones that God has saved. These are the rest of the people of the world, the greatest number. Billions of people never become saved, and God has a care and a concern for them that's on an earthly level, and he blesses them. We talked about this with sun and rain and fruitful seasons and so forth. And so he gives the man who is a rebel and a sinner, also an inheritance which consists of his limited lifespan, of the time that he's able to live in this world and to receive whatever blessings and enjoyments he can get out of life. That's the inheritance to the nations, to the unsaved people of the world. And so the Lord divided to the nations their inheritance. When he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. And again, that would be 13. 13. And when we look into the Bible, we find that God uses certain numbers and they have spiritual meaning, spiritual significance. Some are very easy to see. The number 40, most people are probably familiar with that. Jesus is tempted in the wilderness 40 days. Israel is tempted in the wilderness 40 years. Moses goes up to the mount 40 days. And when you see the number used, the way to arrive at a definition, a spiritual definition, what the number means, is to analyze the context, what's going on when Christ is in the wilderness, temptation. What's going on with Israel in the 40 years in the wilderness, temptation. What's happening when Moses is up in the mount in the camp of Israel? They're being tempted or tested. Another way of saying temptation is to be tried or tested by God. And they fail the test because they make the golden calf. So we then arrive at a spiritual definition for that word 40, the number 40, which is testing. Testing. When you find the number 40, you'll see in the Bible that it points to testing. And we can do the same thing with other numbers. The number 10, well, God speaks of 10 virgins. There are 10 coins that a woman has in one parable, 100 sheep, 1,000 hills in the Psalms, 10,000 saints. And you're saying, well, they're all different numbers. Yes, but I'm grouping them together because we can take a look and carefully analyze what's going on with all these references of 10 or multiples of 10, and we find it's the same type of meaning. It has to do with completeness, the completeness of whatever is in view. The 1,000 hills, God owns the cattle upon 1,000 hills. Does he only own the cattle upon 1,000 hills? You see, this is the problem with those who take the Bible literally and don't realize it's a spiritual book, and you have to look for the spiritual meaning of words. And they would recognize, no, God does not only own the cattle upon 1,000 hills. He owns the cattle upon all hills, or the completeness of hills. And then you see, there's the meaning. There's the meaning. Number 10, completeness. Satan is bound for 1,000 years. Is he bound for a literal 1,000 years? No. He's bound on the cross in 33 AD. He's loosed from his binding in the bottomless pit at the time of the end of the church age, and we can pinpoint that to the year 1988. And therefore, his binding that the Bible calls 1,000 years works itself out to be an actual 1,955 years. Does that mean the Bible is wrong? No. It means those who are trying to insist upon a literal interpretation of the word 1,000 in relationship to Satan, and that's where so many churches and theologians go astray when trying to understand Revelation 20's references. I think from Revelation 20 verses 1 through 6, there may be 6 references to the word 1,000. And we have all sorts of end time scenarios the theologians have come up with, and the premillennialists will say Christ will reign on earth for 1,000 years, and they get all mixed up and go off track because they're taking a word literally that has a spiritual meaning, and the spiritual meaning is completeness. Just substitute the word 1,000 for completeness. Satan is bound for the completeness of whatever is in view, which we can show, I won't get into that, we can show that he was bound for the duration of the church age. And then we have understanding, and we're not, going down the wrong trail of following a number. It must mean a literal 1,000 years, and every one of the pre-mill, the post-mill, the mill, they're all wrong in their eschatology. They're all incorrect because they have erred in these things. Or when God speaks of his coming, the Lord Jesus will come with 10,000 of his saints. The Bible tells us that in at least 4 or 5 different places. Christ comes with 10,000, it says in, I think, one place, and 10,000s in another. And somebody might say, well, which is it? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. 10,000 or 10,000s retain the multiple of 10. And so really it's saying Christ comes with all the saints, the completeness of saints. And the saints are not some super holy people that a church canonized. A saint is simply someone that God has saved and washed away their sin, making them holy. And the fact that their sin is paid for, in God's sight, they have no sin. And you can see why they would be considered holy. And the word saint is the same word as holy. And that's who Jesus is coming with. All of those he has saved will come with the Lord in judgment. And again, we could explain that further, but that will kind of send us off course of what we're trying to get at in this study. But I will go to one verse. There are, again, several verses that speak of Christ coming with 10,000s of his saints, but there are a couple that put it this way. And here's one in Zechariah 14, verse 5, at the end of the verse, and Jehovah my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. See, now there God has helped us to define 10,000 or 10,000s. It means all, and all complete, the complete number of saints, the whole company of them. None are not there or present. All the elect will judge the world. As it says in 1 Corinthians 6, know ye not that the saints will judge the world? Unfortunately, great numbers of Christians or professed Christians do not know that. And that's what part of what we've been saying over the last few years. As God has revealed, he has come already. He has brought judgment to the world, and the saints, or the elect people of God who are left, as 1 Thessalonians 4 says twice in the passage, verses 15 through 17, that the dead in Christ will rise first. That's the resurrection, and the resurrection comes on the last day of the prolonged judgment day period. And then it says, and we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together to be with the Lord. Alive and remain. And that's because God has left his people. He saved everyone he intended to save, all whose names were written in the Lamb's Book of Life, by the date of May 21, 2011. He shuts the door of heaven at that point, puts out the light of the gospel, commences the spiritual judgment process, troubling the inhabitants of the earth, as we have seen. Obviously, over the last few years, that's maybe you don't know that, but that's what is happening. God is troubling the inhabitants of the earth as part of his judgment upon them, and all the elect, a great multitude representing them, are left on the earth, and as far as the rest, they'll rise on the last day and participate in Judgment Day at that point. But all the saints are participating in the judgment by sharing the truth that the Lord is opening up as he reveals his righteous judgment program, and his people declare it. That is what is meant by "know ye not the saints will judge the world." Not that we're pointing the finger at anyone individually, personally. No, we never do that. We never make a judgment about any individual person, but we do share the things that we learn from the Bible, such as the door shut. The door shut, and God has completed his salvation program, and that kind of information. But again, back here in Deuteronomy 32:8, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. That number is 13. And I may have mentioned it before. I'm not sure if I did in this study. But you're probably aware, and you may know someone, that a lot of people have what some call an irrational fear of the number 13. And actually, there's so many people that seem to suffer from this sort of affliction that they have coined a word. And this word is from the Greek, and it is trichaidecaphobia. A very long word, trichaidecaphobia. And the word tri would be 3. Chi in Greek is and dec is 10. So 3 and 10. And of course, phobia means fear of. And that comes from the Greek as well. Fear of 3 and 10. No, not the individual number 3 or the individual number 10, but when you add them together, you get 13. Trichaidecaphobia is a fear of the number 13. That word was coined in the early 20th century, I think around 1910 or 1911. That's how long it's been around. And they coined the word because so many people seem to have, again, what some call an irrational fear of the number 13. And, that's kind of curious, isn't it? Isn't it curious that we study the Bible, and I'll tell you right now, whenever you find the number 13 in the Bible, or multiples of 13, and in this way, it's similar to the number 10 and multiples of 10. Multiples of 10 retain the spiritual meaning, like 10, 100,000, 10,000. It's all completeness. Well, it's the same idea when you find multiples of 13, such as Jacob is entering into Egypt at the age of 130. He's 10 times 13. There's numerous references, and I'll tell you, because I've been studying the Bible a lot of years, and especially looking into end time passages, and I study the whole Bible, but there's so much of the Bible that deals with the end time, and the number 13 pops up again and again and again in its multiples. You might have the number 13 itself, or 26, or 39, or 52. And it's interesting, 52 weeks in a year, and you come to the end of the year. But the number 13, wherever you find it in the Bible, you will find the context of the end of the world, the spiritual context. As you study it, it will have to do with the end of the church age, the end of the world itself, or it can have other end time related events, such as God unsealing his word and revealing great amounts of truth. And so it's very curious that mankind, millions of people, I was looking online, I saw an article in Time magazine, and they were saying how many millions of people have this fear. It's so prevalent that they said in New York City, now I think this was a few years ago, maybe going back to 2014, or that the article was written, but they said in New York City that less than 5% of buildings that are tall enough have a 13th floor. Now that's not saying all buildings, that they don't actually have a 13th floor. They do, but they do not call it the 13th floor. And I think they were speaking to, a developer or someone who sells the buildings or something like that. And he said, well, why should we give a 13th floor and potentially scare away a buyer? Because they know it's fairly common. And you've probably heard there are some airlines that do not have a 13th row. And there are many elevator companies that do not put a 13th floor button. It's very strange, and everyone has heard practically of Friday the 13th. Watch out. Bad luck. Bad luck. Why? How did that get into the mind of men that the number 13, and again, they coined trichidecaphobia, fear of 13, early in the 20th century, because so many people seem to suffer from it. And that's way before, not too much before, really, when you look at things from the long range, but it's still decades before the actual end of the world would arrive. And when did God begin to bring the end of the world? 1988. 1988. We know this. We're not guessing. The Bible has revealed its calendar from the creation of Adam, 11,013 BC, to 1988. You add the two numbers together, minus 1, because of an error in the calendar, no year zero, and you get a total of 13,000 years. Look at what has happened to the world since then. Since 1988. Some of you are too young, and you don't know, and you won't recognize this, but anyone who has lived any length of time prior to that realizes it's a different world. And you've probably heard older people say that. The world today is nothing like the world of the, my time, 1960s, 1970s, early 1980s. Nothing at all like it. And just imagine going back further. Is the world anything like the 1950s or 40s? No. Well, how far back do you have to go before you find what has happened to the world now, that there will be some past historical time when it was similarly bad? And the answer is, you can go back throughout all history, and you'll never find anything like this. So that's kind of coincidental. I'm not trying to say anything. I don't know why it is, but it is very coincidental that man had such a deep-seated fear of the number 13, and God in the Bible, maybe it comes from people who picked up these things in time past from the Bible. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe that's where they got the sense that this number is bad, because whenever the context of the Bible, spiritual context, brings up that number, it is the end of the world. And here we are. Here we are. We've gone beyond, someone might say, well, doesn't that mean we're safe? We've gone beyond the 13,000th year. No, because of the biblical, and we can show proof, the biblical pattern of going to the fullness of a timeline in thousands of years and then tacking on tribulation numbers. Again, from creation to the flood, 6,023 years. From creation to the year 1988, 13,023 years. But there's another pattern that we'll have to talk about when we get together in our next study. We'll see that God breaks up the earth into two different epochs, two different periods of time, so that it's as though the Lord looks upon the world as though there are two earths. One earth prior to the flood that the flood destroyed, the second earth after the flood. And we'll see how the number 13 comes into view in the book of Joshua, and God divides the number 13, and with that division of the number 13, he points to the two earths and to the timeline for each earth, for each period of time, and we'll see something amazing, I think, as it has to do with the year 2033.
Thank you for joining us for E-Bible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until our next Bible study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.